Open up the pitch, make the pitch as big as possible, stretch the opposition. How many times have you heard me use those terms on this channel? I'm guessing quite a lot. And that's because width is an incredibly important part of football. The idea of making the pitch as big as possible, increasing the amount of ground which the opposition defence has to cover, opening up spaces for your team to exploit. Width always has been and always will be a key factor of football. But what if I told you that the opposite could also be extremely useful? The term minimum width. Now you might be thinking, what is minimum width? To be honest, it's pretty self-explanatory, the clue's in the name. It's using the minimum width on the pitch. So rather than having these wide wingers which stretch your position, we are talking about wingers which are going to move inside. Rather than the fullbacks necessarily always flying around on the overlap, we're looking at wingers being a bit more central. Literally using the minimum width on the football pitch. Why would you want to do this? From an attacking sense, one of the reasons why you would want to do this is because, as we can see, it gets your players nice and close to each other. It encourages quick vertical football, interchanging play, 1-2 touch football, dummies, step overs, interchanging all the way up the pitch. A brand of football which I think we all love to watch. That is why you would use minimum width in the final third. Another reason why you might look to use this is because as you get towards the final third of the pitch up here, in and around the penalty area, if you use minimum width, it means you have a lot of players in the box which you can look to supply. You know, it might be a cross into the box or a cutback. There are plenty of options. And United have actually used this quite successfully this season. Take this game against Wolves. The first half where I thought we were absolutely brilliant. One of our best halves of football this season. One of the only times this season we've used actually our strongest 11, which is why I use this game as the sample. What we can see here is that initially we do have a bit of width. Diogo Dalot on the right hand side. However, he is then going to come in field. And importantly, the minimum width is provided on the far side of the pitch. We can see here, Marcus Rashford up the top here, coming into a narrower position. This is all of our attacking players. They are all super narrow, super close to each other. Minimum width. You know, we haven't got many wide players here. We're not hugging the touchlines. We are keeping it nice and compact. And for this goal, we do see the benefit of that. The ball comes into the box. Bruno Fernandes hits a lovely little dummy as he steps over the ball. Only possible because he's got another player close to him. And then Rasmus Højlund eventually lays the ball off to Marcus Rashford. And Rashford, with a brilliant finish, into the far corner. It's absolutely brilliant. But it all comes because United have minimum width. Lots of players in the penalty area, close to each other, dummies, step overs, whatever, link play, a really good finish. This continued in this match as well though. We've got another attack here. Garnacho on the right hand side coming inside with the ball. Minimum width. Rashford is reasonably wide on the far side to be fair, but he's still not exactly hugging the touchline. And down the right hand side, you know, we have pretty much nothing in terms of width. This is a narrow attack. And it again, once again, allows our players to be close to each other. This is winger passing along the floor to the other winger. How often does that happen? Realistically, not that often in the grand scheme of things, but it's able to happen because of minimum width. Marcus Rashford gets the ball on the left-hand side, and now we can see once again the United players are close to each other. There is not much width provided to the attack here. All the players are in close proximity. Granted, you could argue the positioning is a little bit off, but the important thing is that our players are close to each other. And this means that the Wolves defenders are also close to each other. So when someone like Luke Shaw eventually does make the overlap to provide a bit of width, we can see the room that he has to attack. And importantly, once he gets himself to the byline, he has a lot of options in the box to aim for. This is Dalot here, our fullback. This is our right winger here. Minimum width. Options in the box, and eventually it falls for Rasmus Højlund, who buries the ball into the back of the net. It's absolutely brilliant. It can also be used in other ways as well though. Here, again, United are fairly narrow. Let's get rid of that on the screen here. We can see there is not much width being provided on the far side of the pitch. And as Garnacho comes inside, the ball is going to be worked over. Now, eventually the ball moves to the left-hand side. Okay, now Rashford is wider. He is providing width on this occasion. We can see him hugging the touchline as he receives the ball, and we will come back onto this shortly, why we see it in the middle third of the pitch that the team is wider. But anyway, as the move plays out, Rashford gets the ball, and now, because the ball is now on that side, we use minimum width on this side of the pitch. So Garnacho, again our right winger, comes all the way over to join the attack, and it allows Marcus Rashford to find him because, you know, they're in close proximity. We've overloaded this area of the pitch by bringing in the extra man in Garnacho. Garnacho gets on the turn, runs forward with the ball, plays the ball in behind to Rasmus Højlund. It is timed slightly wrong. Rasmus Højlund scores but is offside. But again, you can see the benefit of it. And we've seen this in other games this season as well. Marcus Rashford has the ball on the left-hand side. Minimum width is apparent. There is no one on the right-hand side of the pitch. And that's because Garnacho has made the underlapping run in behind the Everton defence, but near Rashford. Minimum width. We can throw a blanket over all of these players here. There's no one on the far side. Garnacho gets into the box, wins the penalty. We've seen it in another game as well against Liverpool. No width on the right-hand side. Rashford gets the ball, plays the underlapping run of Garnacho. Garnacho eventually has a shot at goal. It comes back out. Rasmus Højlund bundles it over the line. But we can see the key attacking benefit of minimum width. We have lots of players nice and close to each other. Nice and close to each other, close proximity, quick interchanging football, options in the box. There's some good sides to it. There are negatives as well. We're not going to cover that today. If you want another video on that, we can absolutely do that, or we can discuss it in a stream. But for today, we're going to focus on the positives. Next up, the defensive side of the game. If all of your players move forward, of course, importantly, that's the first thing. If they all move forward, but then hold narrow positions, what this means is that as United then lose the ball, we have lots of players close to each other. Nice and close to each other. And of course, the benefit of having players close to each other is that there are reduced distances to cover defensively. You know, if my teammate is 3 yards away, the maximum I'm going to have to sprint is 3 yards. Whereas if my teammate is 20 yards away, that's a lot of open grass which I've got to cover. So this is the big benefit of minimum width. When you lose the ball, all your players are already in central positions. Now your question might be, if that's the case, why are United so bad at winning the ball back the second we lose it? To be honest, I still think the structure needs work. And also the cognitive ability of the players. You know, the players' instinctive responses. A lot of our players' immediate response isn't necessarily to try and win the ball back, even if they are in the positions to do so. So perhaps that could be addressed with recruitment. But regardless, defensively, it offers you a lot because it quickly allows you to suffocate the opposition, move in towards them and win the ball back. If you are unable to do that, there is still a benefit of minimum width, and that is that, for example, if you're using a 3-2 shape, which is, you know, pretty narrow like this, as the opposition do come out from the back and win the ball, you crowd the middle of the pitch, the danger zone, therefore forcing the opposition to play out wide, where it's further away from goal, you always feel a little bit safer. Not too sure what happened to my voice there. But again, we have seen examples of it this season. So not only the attacking side of the game like this, but also if I try and find the clip real quick, we'll go back to the Wolves game for this. Minimum width is apparent in the Manchester United attack. There is no one on the right wing and also no one on the left wing. Everyone is within the width of the penalty area. The benefit of that is that as the ball comes into the box and Wolves clear it, and we look on the edge of the box, Manchester United have several players here. We've got Bruno Fernandes, I believe that is. We've got Casemiro, and we've also got Diogo Dalot. Minimum width has allowed us to crowd the middle of the pitch. What it has also done, though, and I think this is an important thing to pick up on, is it has caused Wolves to drop really narrow themselves. Because we've got 3 players in the box here, Wolves themselves have to commit numbers to this area. So when the second ball comes out to the edge of the penalty area, we can quickly win it back. Minimum width. Now let's look at what happens when we don't use the minimum width. Same game, but on this occasion, Marcus Rashford is a little bit wider on the far side of the pitch. Right up here, we can see Marcus Rashford. He's a little bit wider, and as United lose the ball, that is going to cause a problem. Bruno Fernandes is going to lose possession. The ball is going to be intercepted by this Wolves player. Look at the distance between Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford. And of course, ultimately, the space that is going to open up when Wolves do win the ball. There is a lot of space in this sort of area here. There is loads of space which Wolves can turn and attack. We can see this here. There is a lot of space for them to move into. If Rashford had been holding a narrower starting position, there is every chance he would now be in this area to win the ball back. So again, we can see the benefit of using minimum width and the disadvantage when you don't use it. So again, there are strengths to it. Now the question you might have is, if minimum width is such a good thing, why am I someone who often encourages wide play as well? It doesn't quite add up, right? Contradictory. Well, it's all about the zone of the pitch you are on. If you are in your first phase, if you are in the middle third of the pitch, if you're in the final third, you're going to want a different strategy. And also perhaps depending on the opposition as well. You see, I feel that minimum width is very useful in the final third these days because of the transition defence it provides you with. Lots of players close to each other, you can win the ball back. However, a little bit earlier in the build-up, I'm actually a big fan of width being provided. Wingers wide on the touchline. So why would you want to do this in this phase of the pitch, but not a little bit higher up? Again, it doesn't make sense, so let me try and explain. If you use a bit more width in this phase of the pitch, you have potential to create space and manipulate space and overload the horizontal line across the pitch. So we're talking about, let's say, this guy here, this guy here, this guy here, and perhaps this guy here for the opposition. If you use a bit more width, let's change system here to a 2-4 shape. one which I have encouraged at times this season. If you use this shape, what you do is you horizontally overload the opposition. So we can see we've got Luke Shaw, Casemiro, Kobbie Mainoo and Dalot up against, initially, just 3 players on this line for the opposition. Now, if you do that also with width, stretched, not just pure numbers, but also a stretched pitch like so, it gives these players a lot of room to cover. Quite simply, we know that they can't. There's too much ground to cover, plus a numerical overload. It's a recipe for disaster for the opposition. So what they do is they then move a midfielder in here out. Now, there's a couple of reasons that they do that. One, because they feel they need to match this overload in here and go man-to-man like so. So they feel that that's a decision they need to make. But also, in the back of their mind, they feel that they can make that decision safely because the opposition, Manchester United in this situation, currently have no players in this line here. So there was nothing to stop these players from going out and pressing and being a bit more aggressive defensively. This is the key setup for that minimum width, which we then see in the final third. If you start wide like this, you horizontally overload and stretch the opposition. It opens up a lot of space in these areas here. That's when, so let's say the ball goes back to Harry Maguire, the opposition might use that as a pressing trigger. That's when we can then go forward. We can go inside into these sorts of positions, open up in behind the opposition's midfield, and now start to encourage the use of minimum width in the final third of the pitch. That is the key. Of course, if you attack quickly, there's no telling what will happen. Garnacho might run in behind, Højlund, Rashford might shoot, whatever. However, if you choose to slow it down, that's again when we see the benefits of minimum width. Because you get your players forward into these areas, you keep the pitch nice and compact, you make it really difficult for the opposition to get out should you lose the ball, but for the player in possession, there are always plenty of options. This is why minimum width might be the way forward. It might be the way forward for Manchester United. And again, if we're talking about that middle third play, it is something which Ten Hag has done this season. And again, in this particular game, we can see it here, wide players playing wide. In the middle third, width is key in my opinion. As you move forward into the final third, as we discussed earlier, that's when you can start to use minimum width. But the idea of stretching the pitch in this way, making these spaces for players to come into, is super, super dangerous. Ten Hag has used it well this season, and should he stay in the job, I would expect him to continue using it. The thing which he needs now is players which excel in it. So what are you looking for? Minimum width, players close to each other. You want players who are good at interchanging football. So Rashford and Garnacho, as good as they've been this season, probably aren't the best suited players to that, for example, right? So you need players who are. Even Casemiro, he loses the ball a lot, so it's not necessarily suited to his style. So perhaps Ten Hag might, in the summer, want to sign more technical players who can play that quick 1-2 touch football in the final third. Also, defensively, he might want players that when we lose the ball are physical in the centre of the pitch, but also have the cognitive response to immediately try and win the ball back. That's perhaps how Ten Hag could upgrade this structure moving forward. But in terms of where it's at the moment, I think as long as the balance is right through the pitch, perhaps wide in the first phase, wide in the second phase, and then narrow in the final third, I'm starting to change and really see the benefits behind using it. What do you guys think though? Now I've explained minimum width to you a little bit more, I've shown you United trying to use it. How do you feel about it? Do you think it is a good principle, or do you prefer just for the pitch to be made nice and big, nice and wide? Let me know what you think in the comments down below, but apart from that, we are finished for today. So thank you guys for watching, hope you have enjoyed it, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.